Remove her from the ballroom. My nephew said it into the microphone, as calmly as if he were correcting a seating chart. Two security men stepped away from the marble columns and started toward me. Nearly 300 collectors and investors sat beneath the chandeliers of Newport's Bellevue Hall. On the stage, beneath a cone of white light, rested Lot 27, a trench watch valued at $800,000 and advertised as the crown jewel of my company. Caleb Ward smiled down at me from the podium. "My aunt has been under a great deal of strain," he told the room. "At her age, confusion is understandable." A few people lowered their eyes, others watched with the polite hunger people reserve for public humiliation. I did not argue with the guards. I walked to the auction table, opened my hand, and placed one blued steel screw on the velvet beside the watch. Then I looked at the auctioneer. "Before you sell Lot 27, I said, ask Caleb why a watch his catalog says has never been opened contains a part I made 3 months ago." The room went quiet. Caleb's smile remained in place, but one corner of it stopped moving. What he did not know was that the screw was not the evidence. It was only the key that would make him unlock the rest himself. Before I tell you how my own nephew came to believe he could erase me from my life's work, let me know where you are listening from. And if someone in your family has ever mistaken patience for weakness, like this story and subscribe. My name is Margaret Voss. Most people call me Maggie. I was 69 years old that night, and for 43 years I had repaired clocks and watches other people were too frightened to touch. I was a master watchmaker. Restoration is not about making an object look new. It is about knowing which scars belong to its history and which ones were put there by someone trying to deceive you. My late husband, Daniel, understood that better than anyone. Together, we founded Voss & Bell Horological Restoration in a narrow brick storefront on Westminster Street in Providence. We began with 2 benches, 1 cabinet, and a borrowed timing machine. By the time Daniel died, we employed 28 people and held restoration contracts with museums, auction houses, and private collectors across the country. After his funeral, I kept working because the silence at home was worse than the ticking at the shop. I had no children of my own, but when my younger sister died 17 years earlier, her 2 children became mine in every way that mattered. Nora was 20 then, frightened and practical. Caleb was 13, furious at the world and determined never to need anyone. I taught Caleb to polish a pivot without rounding it and to listen to a movement before opening the case. He was never gifted with his hands. He was gifted with people. By 35, he could walk into a room of wealthy strangers and leave with 3 of them believing his success had been their idea. He modernized our client system and brought in investors who would never have returned my calls. When I named him Chief Operating Officer, I thought I was honoring the boy I had raised. 5 months before the gala, Caleb entered my workshop carrying 2 cups of coffee and an expression of rehearsed concern. "You were here past midnight again," he said. I did not look up from the marine chronometer beneath my lens. "The balance staff was bent, so is your spine. That has been true since 1998. Normally, he would have laughed. That morning he placed the coffee beside my hand and remained standing. "We need to talk about custody procedures." I removed my glasses. Caleb explained that our insurer had revised its standards for high-value inventory. Every watch valued above $100,000 would now be transferred to a new off-site vault outside Providence. The facility had biometric access, climate control, and digital tracking. "It protects the clients," he said, "and it protects you from what? From carrying the entire company in your head." He smiled when he said it, but his eyes studied my face. I told him our existing vault had passed inspection 3 months earlier. He answered too quickly. "This isn't optional. That was the first wrong beat. A good watch does not announce its failure with a shattered spring. It begins with a hesitation so small most people dismiss it." I asked to see the insurer's directive. Caleb slid a folder across my bench. The cover page was authentic, but the document was a photocopy, and the pages behind it described procedures without naming the facility that would receive the inventory. I tapped the blank line, "Where is the vault?" "A private location. I am listed as chief custodian. You are the founder." The distinction was deliberate. Before I could answer, Nora appeared in the doorway. She held a ledger against her chest and would not meet my eyes. "The board approved it yesterday," she said. I looked from her to Caleb. "There was a board meeting yesterday?" "An emergency call," Caleb replied. "You were resting." I had not been resting. I had been in the building all afternoon. Caleb reached over and gently turned my coffee cup so the handle faced my right hand. It was the sort of gesture a loving nephew might make for an aging aunt whose fingers had begun to tremble. Except my right hand did not tremble. My left did. He had forgotten which weakness he was planning to use against me. That evening, after everyone left, I tried my access code at the inner vault. The green light flashed once, then it turned red. I entered the code again, access denied. Behind the steel door were 31 watches belonging to people who trusted my name more than any contract. I called Caleb. He did not answer then. From inside the darkened packing room behind me, I heard the soft scrape of a cardboard box moving across the floor. I switched on the light. The room was empty, but on the packing table lay a courier manifest for 3 watches scheduled to leave at midnight. All 3 lines listed the same movement serial number. I picked up the courier manifest and carried it beneath the brightest lamp in the packing room. 3 watches, 3 different clients, 3 different insurance values, 1 movement serial number. That was impossible. The movement number is the mechanical identity of a watch. Cases can be polished, dials can be refinished, hands can be replaced, but the number stamped into the movement follows the mechanism through every legitimate repair. Listing the same number 3 times was like assigning 1 social security number to 3 strangers. I photographed the manifest with my phone, then returned it exactly where I had found it. A minute later, the side door opened. Caleb entered carrying a leather laptop bag. He stopped when he saw me standing beneath the fluorescent lights. "Aunt Maggie." He recovered quickly, but I had seen the pause. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I own the building. You founded the company," he corrected gently. "Ownership is more complicated now." That was the second time he had drawn the distinction. I pointed to the manifest. "These serial numbers are identical." Caleb glanced down, then released a small, tired laugh. "It's a migration error. 3 separate records." The new inventory platform uses a temporary placeholder when older handwritten files are missing a digit. Once the watches reach the vault, the imaging team verifies each movement and corrects the database. He gave the explanation without hesitation. It was technical enough to sound reasonable and ordinary enough to discourage further questions. I asked why the transfer was happening at midnight. "Security scheduling," he said. "Fewer people on the road, lower exposure, and why was I not informed?" His expression softened. "We did inform you. No, you informed the board." He lowered his voice as though calming a difficult patient. "I sent you an email on Monday. I had received no such email, but that did not mean he had not sent one." Caleb knew I rarely checked messages during bench work. He also knew that accusing him without proof would make me look defensive. He picked up the manifest and tucked it into the folder. "You taught me not to panic over one strange reading. I taught you to verify it, and we will." He kissed my cheek before leaving the room. That gesture unsettled me more than an argument would have. When Caleb was a boy, affection had embarrassed him. If I touched his shoulder in public, he pulled away. If I praised him, he looked at the floor. He had learned tenderness later, after he discovered how useful it could be. Still, I did not go home that night believing my nephew was stealing from me. Love resists evidence, it negotiates with it. I spent the drive back to my house remembering the first winter Caleb and Nora lived with Daniel and me. Their mother, my younger sister Rebecca, had died after a sudden cerebral hemorrhage. There had been no warning and no time to prepare 2 frightened children for a life without her. Nora cried quietly and followed rules. Caleb broke them before anyone could use them against him. On his 3rd night in our house, I found him in Daniel's workshop trying to pry open a pocket watch with a table knife. "That belonged to my father," he said. Their father had disappeared years earlier. The watch was one of the few things he had left behind. I took the knife from Caleb and showed him the correct notch along the case rim. "Force is what people use when they don't understand how something opens," I told him. He watched me remove the back without leaving a mark. After that, he began sitting beside me at the bench. He never developed the patience for restoration, but he understood value. He could look at a collector and sense whether the man wanted history, prestige, or permission to spend more than he should. Daniel used to say Caleb could hear the machinery inside people better than the machinery inside watches. At the time, we considered it a gift. We paid for his college. When he changed majors twice, we paid for the extra semesters. When his first consulting business failed, I covered the remaining office lease so the landlord would not sue him. When he returned to Providence with a business plan for modernizing Voss & Bell, I gave him a desk and a title. He earned more after that. That part mattered. Caleb increased our revenue, built relationships with international auction houses, and convinced private collectors to place million-dollar pieces in our care. He brought efficiency to accompany Daniel, and I had managed with handwritten ledgers and memory. For years, he appeared to be exactly what I had hoped for, the next generation protecting what the previous one had built. The following morning, I arrived before 7. My vault code still did not work. Nora was already in the accounting office. She sat beneath a green banker's lamp, staring at 2 monitors filled with spreadsheets. Her coffee had gone cold beside her. I placed my handbag on the chair. Why was my vault access removed? She kept her eyes on the screen. It wasn't removed, it was denied twice. Caleb said the biometric upgrade reset several credentials. Did yours reset? Her fingers stopped moving. For a few hours, Nora, she finally looked at me. There were shadows beneath her eyes, and the skin around her thumbnail was torn, where she had been biting it. The insurer made recommendations, she said. Caleb believed we had to act quickly. Did you see those recommendations? I saw the summary. The same summary he showed me? She looked away again. I asked about the duplicate serial numbers. Nora opened a drawer, removed a printed report, and searched the pages too quickly. She was performing concern rather than feeling it. Legacy data conversion, she said. It has happened before. Show me where. Maggie, I have payroll due today. It was the first time she had used my name instead of Aunt Maggie during a disagreement. I let the silence sit between us. Then I noticed a framed photograph on the corner of her desk. Nora's son Owen stood in a baseball uniform with one front tooth missing. Beside the photograph was an envelope from a pediatric cardiology practice in Boston. Nora saw me looking and turned the envelope face down. Is Owen all right? He's fine. The answer came before I finished asking. I knew then that fear was present in the room. I simply did not know what shape it had taken. Before I could press further, Caleb appeared in the doorway. He carried a slim white box tied with a navy ribbon. Good, he said brightly. You're both here. He placed the box on Nora's desk and opened it. Inside was an 18th century gold repeater, belonging to the Bellwether family, one of the most valuable pieces ever entrusted to our company. My intake schedule showed it was not due for another 6 weeks. Caleb lifted the watch carefully. The owner requested an early private appraisal, he said. Serena is bringing a potential buyer this afternoon. The Bellwethers never authorized a sale. They did last night. He handed me a printed authorization bearing the client's signature. I knew that signature. I had seen it on Christmas cards, restoration contracts, and personal letters for more than 20 years. This one was almost perfect, almost. The final stroke leaned left instead of right. Then the telephone on Nora's desk rang. She answered, listened for 3 seconds, and looked directly at Caleb. It's Mrs. Bellwether, she whispered. She says someone told her the watch was lost in transit. Nora kept the receiver pressed to her ear while Caleb reached across the desk and held out his hand. Give me the phone. She hesitated only for a second, but I saw it. Then she obeyed. Mrs. Bellwether, Caleb said, his voice changing at once. Softer, warmer. This is Caleb Ward. I'm terribly sorry someone frightened you. He turned slightly away from me as he listened. No, ma'am, your repeater is not lost. It arrived safely and is sitting in front of me right now. That part was true. The watch lay open in its white presentation box, its gold case catching the light from Nora's desk lamp. The engraved initials on the back belonged to Mrs. Bellwether's great-grandfather, a naval surgeon who had carried it through 2 wars. Caleb smiled as if Mrs. Bellwether could see him. I believe a courier representative confused your shipment with another client's package. We'll investigate immediately. He paused. No, there is no need for you to come in. We have everything under control. I watched his hand settle over the printed authorization. He covered the signature with his palm. Yes, Serena Klein is conducting a preliminary valuation, but nothing will happen without your approval. Another pause. I understand, of course. I'll call you personally this afternoon. He ended the call and placed the receiver back in its cradle. What exactly did she say? I asked. Caleb's smile disappeared. That a courier clerk called to report a missing package. And did she authorize a private sale? She is considering one. That is not what I asked. Nora pushed her chair back and stood. I need to check payroll. She left the room before either of us could answer. Caleb waited until the door closed. Then he folded the authorization and slipped it into his jacket. You embarrassed her, he said. I asked a question. You interrogated her about her son's medical care, and then implied she falsified a document. I implied nothing. You didn't have to. He closed the presentation box and tied the navy ribbon around it again. For the first time in all the years I had known him, Caleb handled a valuable watch carelessly. He pulled the ribbon too tight, pressing the lid against the crystal. I reached for the box. He moved it beyond my hand. Serena needs this upstairs. No watch leaves accounting until I complete intake inspection. That procedure is changing when? It changed yesterday. I looked at him. By whose authority? The board's. I chair the board. You hold the title of chair. There it was again, not owner. Founder, not authority title. Caleb lifted the box and walked toward the door. I stepped into his path. He stopped, but he did not back away. When he was 13, I had been 5 inches taller than he was. Now he looked down at me with the measured patience of a man waiting for an elderly woman to become tired. Move, Aunt Maggie. The words were quiet that made them worse. I did not move. You don't have Mrs. Bellwether's permission to sell that watch. We are not selling it. You brought in a buyer. A potential buyer for a preliminary conversation with a forged signature. His jaw tightened. You need to be careful with words like that. So do you. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Nora returned. She stood in the doorway holding a payroll folder, though the papers inside were upside down. Please, she said. Not here. Her eyes moved toward the glass wall separating the accounting office from the main restoration floor. Several employees had stopped working. Heads were lowered, but nobody was fooling anyone. Caleb noticed them too. His expression changed immediately. He placed the white box back on the desk and reached gently for my elbow. Aunt Maggie is tired, he announced through the glass. We're going to give her a little space. I pulled my arm away. I am not tired. No one looked at me. Caleb opened the office door and spoke to the staff in the calm, reassuring tone he used with nervous clients. Everything is fine. Please return to your benches. One by one, they did. That was the moment I understood how much of my company had already been taken from me. Not the building, not the accounts, the room. For 43 years, when I spoke on that floor, people listened because they trusted that I knew what I was looking at. Now a younger man only had to say I was tired, and my own employees lowered their heads. Caleb waited until the workshop noise resumed. We should discuss your schedule, he said. My schedule is on the board outside my office. You're doing too much delicate work. I completed a Breguet calendar last week. After missing 2 appointments, I missed 1 lunch with Charles Pruitt. You also forgot a client's name. I called Robert Langley by his brother's name. They are identical twins. Nora covered her mouth. Pretending to cough, Caleb leaned closer. People are concerned. Which people? The board, some clients, employees, name one. He did not. Instead, he reached into his jacket and removed a small plastic card. My vault credential. He placed it on Nora's desk. We've temporarily suspended your access to high-value inventory. Nora stared at the card as if she had never seen it before. I asked, did you vote for this? She rubbed the torn skin beside her thumbnail. It's only until the medical review. What medical review? Caleb answered, Dr. Salter agreed to conduct a cognitive and motor assessment. Dr. Salter had been my physician for 12 years. He had never mentioned such a test. You contacted my doctor. We're family. That is not an answer. He straightened the cuffs of his suit. You had a tremor while handling the Kavanaugh chronometer. You left your glasses in the parts washer. Last night, you entered the vault code twice after your access had been reset. I entered it because no one told me it had been reset. That's not how Eli described it. I turned toward the glass wall. Eli Booker sat at the smallest bench near the polishing room. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes fixed on a brass movement plate that had not moved beneath his tool. Caleb picked up the bellwether box. "You should go home," he said. "Rest. Let us handle the transition." The transition, not the upgrade, not the insurance review. The word slipped out before he could dress it properly. I stepped aside and let him pass. Fighting him in front of the staff would only strengthen the picture he was painting. An aging founder, emotional and confused, unable to accept that the company had moved beyond her. So I put on my coat. I smiled at Nora, and I left through the front door of the business I had built. I did not drive home. I parked around the corner and waited. At 12:17, Serena Klein arrived in a black town car. Caleb met her at the side entrance carrying the bellwether box. At 12:23, Eli slipped out through the loading door. He looked up and down the alley before walking quickly toward my car. I unlocked the passenger door. He climbed inside without greeting me. His hands smelled of polishing compound, and there was a fresh cut across his thumb. "They changed the overnight manifests after you left," he whispered. "How many boxes?" "6. Where were they sent?" He looked back toward the loading entrance. "Nowhere on the paperwork." Then he opened his fist. Resting in his palm was a broken red wax seal bearing the Bellwether family crest. It had been cut from a package 3 weeks earlier. The broken wax seal in Eli's palm should not have existed. When a valuable watch arrives at Voss & Bell, the package is photographed before it is opened. The outer seal is logged and stored with the intake record. Mrs. Bellwether's seal had been entered 3 weeks earlier as intact and archived. Yet here it was, cut through the center and carried out of my loading room by a frightened apprentice. "Where did you find it?" I asked. "In the polishing trash. 10 minutes ago. I turned it beneath the gray afternoon light. The red wax was clean on one side, but the reverse carried a thin crescent of black adhesive. Someone had removed the original seal, attached it to another package, then discarded it after the exchange." "Did you see who changed the boxes?" Eli shook his head. "I saw Caleb bring the bellwether case downstairs last night. Serena was with him. They locked the packing room and told me to finish in front." "Why didn't you call me?" His face tightened. "Caleb said you were sick. He said the board had been hiding how bad it was." "What exactly did he say?" "That you'd started confusing clients and that your hands weren't safe. He said upsetting you could trigger an episode. Caleb had wrapped my removal in concern so neatly that decent people were afraid to challenge him." "Do you believe him?" Eli stared at his cut thumb. "No, but yesterday I didn't know what to believe. That answer was more useful than a declaration of loyalty. I placed the seal inside a clean envelope. Go back inside, mention none of this. Do not take another risk unless you are certain you won't be seen." "You think they're stealing watches?" "I think one package was opened without authorization. That is all I know. Suspicion is not proof. A watch that gains time can have a dozen causes. You do not accuse the last watchmaker who touched it until you open the case." Ellie returned through the loading door. The next morning I called Mrs. Bellwether and asked her to bring the repeater to me if Caleb returned it. I offered a private condition check at no charge. "Caleb said you were taking a leave," she said. "I am reducing my schedule. He also said the watch had never left your building." "Did he return it?" "A courier delivered it at 8. Was the package sealed?" "It had my family crest. I asked her not to wind the watch." 3 hours later, Mrs. Bellwether arrived at my house carrying the white presentation box. She was 76, elegant, even in worry, and angry enough to walk faster than her cane usually allowed. "My grandfather heard this watch every night of his childhood," she said. "If someone damaged it, I want the truth." I led her into the small workroom Daniel had built behind our kitchen. It lacked the company's advanced equipment, but it had proper light, magnification, and a timing machine. I photographed the box, ribbon, and seal. The seal was not the original. It was a convincing reproduction. But in the genuine bellwether crest, the lion's tail curved inward over the shield. On this one, it curved away. "I never noticed," she said. "You weren't supposed to." I opened the box. The repeater looked correct at first glance. The case bore the expected dents near the pendant. The enamel dial had the same hairline fracture between 4 and 5. Even the blued hands carried the slight unevenness produced by 19th century heating. Then I wound it and placed it on the timing machine. 19 seconds fast. Mrs. Bellwether looked at the screen. Is that bad? For this watch, it is strange. I had serviced it 8 years earlier. Its original balance was delicate but stable. My records showed an average gain of 3 seconds per day. I opened the back. The movement was beautifully finished, too beautifully. Several screw heads had been polished to the same mirror shine. Old screws do not age identically. One darkens, another scratches, another rounds slightly from a century of careful hands. These looked like a row of new coins. The bridge carried the correct maker's signature. The serial number matched the Bellwether records. But beneath the balance, where almost no buyer would look, the regulator scale had been cut by a modern computer-guided tool. Its lines were too shallow and too perfect, Mrs. Bellwether whispered. Is it fake? The case and dial may be yours. The movement is not. Near the mainspring barrel, I found a fresh crescent mark left by a case knife. Someone had transplanted a substituted movement into the original case within the past few weeks. I photographed every angle. Where is the real one? She asked. I could not answer. At 4 that afternoon, Caleb called me. I heard Mrs. Bellwether visited you. She asked me to inspect her watch. You are not authorized to perform company work from your house. She owns the watch, and Voss & Bell carries the liability. Then he offered his explanation. The replacement bridge was installed during emergency stabilization. Serena discovered a crack before the appraisal. We used a donor movement so the original would not suffer further damage. It was plausible, not ethical without the owner's consent, but mechanically possible. Where is the original movement? In secure conservation storage. Which storage? The new vault, then show it to Mrs. Bellwether. A pause. For the first time, Caleb had to construct his next sentence instead of retrieving it. I will arrange that after the insurer completes its review. When soon, he ended the call. I studied the photographs again. A donor movement explained the modern regulator scale, the uniform screws, even the changed rate. For nearly an hour, I considered the possibility that Caleb had violated procedure to protect the watch rather than steal it. Then I enlarged the photograph of the serial number. The digits had been restamped. Beneath the final 7, almost erased by polishing, was the lower curve of another number. I searched my old service archive for that partial pattern. The match appeared in less than a minute. The movement inside Mrs. Bellwether's watch belonged to a timepiece reported destroyed in a warehouse fire 11 years earlier. The watch reported destroyed in the warehouse fire had belonged to a Philadelphia collector named Martin Hale. 11 years earlier, Hale's storage facility burned after an electrical fault in its climate control system. His insurer declared the contents a total loss. Among the listed pieces was a Swiss minute repeater whose movement number ended in 417. The same number now sat beneath a false 7 inside Mrs. Bellwether's case. I opened the restoration notes attached to the claim. The last watchmaker to service Hale's repeater before the fire was Leonard Marsh. Leo and I had spent 30 years disliking each other with professional consistency. He believed restoration should make a watch look new. I believed age should remain visible where it belonged. We had argued at conferences, challenged each other's appraisals, and once gone 5 years without speaking because he replaced an original balance spring in a museum piece without documenting it. But Leo was not careless. He was proud. That could be worse. His old workshop mark appeared in the service photographs. A tiny double crescent stamped beneath the barrel bridge. I enlarged the image from Mrs. Bellwether's substituted movement. There it was by noon. I had convinced myself I understood. Leo had kept the Hale movement instead of returning it to the burned inventory. Years later, someone bought it from him, altered the serial number, and used it inside a counterfeit. The theory gave me a culprit outside my family. I wanted it to be true badly enough that I stopped treating it like a theory. I called Leo and asked him to meet me at Voss & Bell. You finally need a real watchmaker? He asked. I need an explanation. I should have met him somewhere private. I should have consulted an insurer and traced the old claim. Instead, I drove to the company with Mrs. Bellwether's written permission to retain the watch. I was angry. Anger makes speed feel like clarity. Caleb was in the glass conference room with Serena Klein and Charles Pruitt when I arrived. Charles had chaired our board for 9 years. He was a silver-haired estate attorney who spoke slowly and wore kindness like an expensive overcoat. "Maggie," he said, rising. "Caleb said you were resting. I have rested enough." Serena remained seated. She wore a cream suit and a narrow gold watch worth more than most people's cars. Her eyes moved to the bellwether box. "You should not have removed client property." "The client gave it to me." Caleb closed the door. "This is exactly what we were trying to prevent, then prevent this." I placed the opened watch beneath the document camera and projected the movement onto the wall. The false serial number appeared 6 feet wide behind Caleb's shoulder. I showed them the erased curve beneath the final digit, the Hale insurance record, and Leo's double crescent mark. Charles adjusted his glasses. "What are you alleging?" "That a movement declared destroyed 11 years ago was re-stamped and installed in Mrs. Bellwether's watch without her knowledge." Serena folded her hands. "Salvaged parts are legal when properly documented." "This was not documented." Caleb spoke gently. "We explained that the original movement was placed in conservation storage." "Then produce it." "We will. You have had 24 hours. The door opened. Leo Marsh entered wearing a brown overcoat and the same irritated expression he had worn since 1987. He looked at the projection, then at me. "You dragged me across Providence for that. You serviced the Hale repeater." "I serviced hundreds. Your mark is under the bridge." He stepped closer. For several seconds, he said nothing. I mistook his silence for guilt. "Did you keep the movement after the fire?" I asked. "Did you sell it?" "No, the mark is yours. The mark was mine." Leo pointed to the lower crescent. "My stamp always touched the screw recess. That one stops short." I enlarged the image. He was right. The difference was less than half a millimeter. Leo removed his glasses. "Someone copied my mark who had access to the punch. My apprentice, my foreman, half the restorers who passed through my shop." "When did you last possess it?" 6 years ago. "What happened to it?" "My tools were sold when I closed." "To whom?" "A liquidation company." "Which one?" "I don't remember." Caleb exhaled loudly. "Of course you don't." Leo looked at him. "I wasn't speaking to you." Serena stood and closed the watch box. "This has gone far enough. We have an elderly founder removing client property, accusing a respected retired craftsman of theft, and presenting incomplete records as proof of conspiracy." "I did not accuse him of conspiracy. You asked whether he stole insured property." The distinction sounded weak even to me. Charles stepped between us. "Maggie, nobody doubts your devotion, but grief, exhaustion, and a motor tremor can place pressure on judgment. My husband has been dead 4 years. Grief does not follow a calendar." Caleb placed a hand on my shoulder. I shook it off. The movement made my left hand tremble. Not severely enough, Serena noticed first. Her gaze dropped to my fingers. Caleb did not smile, but something inside him relaxed. He had been waiting for a visible weakness. Leo stared at the false mark. "You're wrong about me," he said. Then he looked at Caleb. "But she may not be wrong about the watch. That should have slowed the room down." Instead, Caleb moved faster. He opened the door and called Nora inside. Eli and 3 senior restorers had gathered beyond the glass. "For the protection of our clients and Aunt Maggie herself," Caleb announced, "I am invoking the temporary incapacity provision in the company bylaws." Nora went still. Charles lowered his eyes. Serena already had the document prepared. "Until a medical evaluation was completed, I was suspended from restoration work, denied access to company records, and forbidden to contact clients in the name of Voss and Bell." Caleb handed me the pen. I did not take it. Then Nora whispered, "Aunt Maggie, please don't make this worse." The betrayal in her voice was not cruelty, it was fear. Before I could ask what Caleb had done to frighten her, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number contained 1 photograph. 6 white watch boxes sat inside the trunk of Caleb's car. On top of them lay the original movement from Mrs. Bellwether's repeater. The photograph stayed on my screen for less than 10 seconds. Then the message vanished. Whoever sent it had used a disappearing image service, but 10 seconds was enough. I had trained my eyes to capture small mechanical relationships before a spring slipped or a screw rolled beneath a bench. 6 white boxes, Caleb's black sedan, Mrs. Bellwether's original movement on a folded blue polishing cloth, and reflected faintly in the trunk lid the sleeve of a gray work jacket. Ellie owned one, so did 4 other employees. I locked my phone and looked up. Caleb still held the suspension document. Nora stood beside him, pale and rigid. Charles Pruitt watched me with the sympathetic expression of a man observing someone else's decline from a safe distance. A minute earlier, I had been prepared to fight. The photograph changed my mind. If the original bellwether movement was in Caleb's car, he was moving client property outside the official chain of custody. But the image alone proved little. There was no date, visible plate, or way to identify the photographer. If I showed it to Caleb, he would search every phone in the building until he found the sender. So I let my shoulders drop. I may have overreacted. I said. The room became still. Caleb studied me. I looked down at my trembling left hand and allowed it to continue, instead of steadying it against the table. I accused Leo without enough evidence. That was wrong. Leo opened his mouth. I gave him a small shake of my head. Not now. Charles stepped closer. No one is judging you, Maggie. That was exactly what everyone was doing. I turned to Caleb. Perhaps the medical assessment is reasonable. Nora looked at me sharply. Caleb did not answer at once. Surrender had never come naturally to me. I made it easier for him. I am tired, I said. I do not want the company damaged because I am too proud to recognize what is happening. The sentence cost me more than I expected. Voss and Bell had survived recessions, a burglary, Daniel's cancer, and the year our largest museum client nearly collapsed. Saying I might endanger it felt like placing a counterfeit signature beneath my own life. But Caleb believed me. His face softened. We all want what is best for you. I know. I signed the suspension acknowledgement. Not the medical conclusions. Not a transfer of authority. Only the receipt confirming I had been informed. Caleb did not notice. People who believe they have won rarely read the last line. I left with my handbag, coat, and Mrs. Bellwether's watch. Serena objected, but Mrs. Bellwether had placed it in my personal custody in writing. Leo followed me to the sidewalk. You made me look like a thief, he said. I know. And now you're pretending to become helpless. I looked at him. I knew you before your hair turned white, he said. You do not surrender that politely. Your old punch may be connected to this, it may. Find out who bought it. Why should I help you? Because someone copied your mark badly. Pride did what friendship could not. He gave one curt nod and walked away. The medical review took place 2 days later in Dr. Salter's office. Caleb attended without being invited. He sat beside me while the doctor asked me to remember 5 words. Draw a clock, identify shapes, and touch each finger to my thumb. I answered some questions correctly. On others, I hesitated. I misplaced one number on the clock face. I repeated apple twice and omitted velvet. When Dr. Salter asked about my tremor, I demonstrated it at its worst. Caleb watched every mistake with grave tenderness. The performance was not difficult. What frightened me was how eagerly he accepted it. Afterward, Dr. Salter asked Caleb to leave. The door closed. My physician folded his arms. What are you doing? I need you to document a mild age-related tremor and recommend reduced stress. You scored 12 points lower than 6 months ago. I was distracted. You deliberately drew 11 where 9 belongs. I met his eyes. Someone is manufacturing evidence of my incompetence. That is a serious accusation. Then do not believe me. Just do not diagnose a disease I do not have. He studied me. I can state that the screening was inconclusive and recommend a full neurological evaluation. Nothing more. That gives me time. How much? I do not know. He was not pleased, but he agreed. For the next week, I became the woman Caleb had described. I called Nora and asked the same question twice. I arrived at the company wearing mismatched gloves. I stood before my old vault and pretended I had forgotten why I was there. Once, when Serena passed, I asked whether she was a new client. Her smile lasted half a second too long. The staff began speaking softly around me. Some were kind, others avoided my eyes. Caleb restored my access to public areas, because a harmless founder wandering the halls supported his story better than an angry one locked outside. That was his mistake. I no longer visited as an owner. I visited as furniture. People carried boxes past me. They discussed schedules within earshot. They left doors open because they believed I could no longer understand what I saw. On Thursday afternoon, I sat at my old bench pretending to sort worthless screws. The real work happened beneath the surface. From a discarded parts tray beside the polishing station, I removed one brass bridge, then another. Both bore the same freshly engraved movement number. I searched deeper at the bottom, under dirty tissue. lay a third, 3 balance bridges, 3 identical numbers, 3 different patterns of wear. That could not happen by accident. I wrapped them separately and slipped them into my coat. As I stood, I noticed inventory tape stuck beneath the tray. It carried a storage code I had never seen. At home, I entered the code into the old shipping archive. A hidden destination appeared. The address belonged to a private collateral warehouse in Cranston. And Voss & Bell was not listed as the depositor. Caleb Ward was. The warehouse in Cranston sat behind a chain-link fence between a plumbing supplier and an abandoned textile mill. From the road, it looked ordinary, gray concrete walls, no sign beyond a small metal plaque that read Meridian Sigurd Logistics. A camera tracked my car as I passed, so I did not slow down. I drove 3 blocks farther, turned into a pharmacy parking lot, and wrote the address in my appointment book. Caleb had deposited something there under his own name. The question was whether it belonged to him. I could identify a false bridge or a replaced wheel. I could not trace warehouse liens, insurance schedules, or secured credit facilities. Pride had already pushed me into one accusation before the evidence was ready. I would not make the same mistake twice. That evening, I called Maya Ortiz. Maya and I had met 7 years earlier after a collector accused Voss & Bell of damaging a platinum chronograph during shipment. The courier blamed our packing, the insurer blamed the client. Maya found that the shipping company had reused an impact sensor and altered its scan time. She recovered the full value of the watch without raising her voice once. She had spent 30 years following money through insurance claims, estate inventories, and luxury goods fraud. She trusted documents less than people expected, and people less than documents deserved. We met the next morning at a diner in Pawtucket. Maya arrived in a dark raincoat, her reading glasses hanging from a cord. "You look terrible," she said. "I have been practicing. For what?" Looking harmless, she studied my face, then slid into the booth. I placed 3 sealed envelopes on the table. Each contained 1 brass bridge from the discard tray. Beside them, I set the photograph of the duplicate manifest, the warehouse address, the bellwether movement images, and the old fire loss record. Maya did not touch anything for almost a minute. Then she asked, "Who knows you have these?" "No one. That is probably not true." I told her about Eli's message and Leo's copied mark. "You have several different problems," she said. "They may be connected, or you may be forcing them together, because your nephew has frightened you." "He has not frightened me. He removed you from your company, accessed client property, and arranged a medical evaluation." Fear would be appropriate. I do not want an emotional answer. Good emotional answers are expensive. Maya examined the photographs. She asked for the names of every client connected to the repeated serial numbers, the insurer, the off-site facility, and all entities controlled by Caleb or Serena. I do not have access to current corporate records. Public filings are enough to begin. What do you need from me? Nothing illegal, no stolen passwords, no entering offices after hours, no recordings made where people expect privacy. She picked up 1 envelope. "These bridges are company property. They were discarded. Then document where and when you found them. Memory changes under pressure." Maya ordered coffee and began making a timeline on a paper napkin. The first line was the insurer's revised custody policy. The second was my loss of vault access. The third was the midnight transfer. The fourth was Mrs. Bellwether's false authorization. When she reached the Cranston warehouse, she stopped. "Meridian does not simply store collectibles," she said. "They also verify collateral for specialty lenders." "What kind of collateral?" "Art, jewelry, wine, rare cars, watches. Assets too unusual for a normal bank. Caleb may have borrowed against the company collection." "Does Voss & Bell own a collection?" "Some reference pieces. Nothing close to the value he has been moving. Then the lender may believe client watches belong to the company. Client property entered our care for restoration, appraisal, or storage. It never became ours. Using it as collateral would be theft dressed in accounting language." Maya folded the napkin. "I will search lien filings, related companies, and insurance claims." "You will continue being confused. I dislike that part. That is why it is useful. For 6 days, I heard nothing. I visited Voss & Bell twice. On the first visit, I asked Caleb whether Daniel was coming to lunch. Daniel had been dead for 4 years. Caleb's eyes flicked toward Serena. "Not today, Aunt Maggie." On the second visit, I dropped a tray of inexpensive screws across the floor. While two employees helped gather them, I watched Serena carry a red portfolio into the conference room. The cover bore the logo of Aurelius Heritage Group, an investment company that had begun buying family-owned restoration firms. Caleb was not merely hiding inventory, he was preparing the company for sale. Nora found me near the coat closet. "You should stop coming here alone," she whispered. "Why? Every time you do, Caleb writes another incident report." "What kind?" "Confusion, unsafe handling, client interference. Did you write any?" Her eyes filled, but she did not answer. I touched her arm. "What has he threatened?" She stepped away. "Nothing." Then she glanced toward the accounting office. Her fear still had no clear shape, but it had grown. That night, Maya called from a number I did not recognize. "Do not use your regular phone after this," she said. "What did you find?" "A company called Orison Provenance Services has received $480,000 from Voss & Bell over 18 months. I had never heard the name. Who owns it?" "On paper, a Delaware holding company. Behind that, Serena Klein. The payments were labeled authentication research, export consultation, and private placement fees. Each occurred within days of a client watch being transferred off-site." "There is more," Maya said. "Caleb filed a financing statement 9 weeks ago. The secured party is North Atlantic Specialty Credit." "For how much?" $8 million. I gripped the edge of my desk. "What did he pledge?" The collateral description reads, "All company-owned horological inventory, present and after acquired, including items held at Meridian Secured Logistics." "Those watches are not company-owned, I know. How many are listed?" "The public filing does not say. But I found the lender's insurance certificate. Paper moved on her end. The declared collateral value is $26 million. Voss & Bell had never owned $26 million in watches. Our clients did." Then Maya spoke more quietly, "And the policy includes a loss payee clause for fire, theft, and unexplained disappearance." The fire clause changed the shape of the crime. Until that moment, I had believed Caleb was using our clients' watches as temporary collateral. It was theft, but theft with a financial objective: borrow against assets he did not own, close a transaction, then replace the watches before anyone noticed. The insurance certificate suggested something darker. If the collateral disappeared, burned, or became unrecoverable, North Atlantic Specialty Credit would be paid before the owners ever saw a dollar. Caleb was not merely borrowing against other people's property. He had ensured its destruction. "Can you prove he requested that clause?" I asked. "Not yet," Maya said. "Specialty lenders often require broad coverage. It could be standard, but combined with false serial numbers and substituted movements. Combined, it is alarming. In court, alarming is not enough." She was right. I wanted a clean answer because clean answers permit clean action. Instead, I had a collection of irregularities circling one another without touching. "What happens if the company is sold?" I asked. "That depends on the buyer's due diligence." Aurelius Heritage Group. Maya was silent for a moment. "They have acquired 4 restoration firms in 6 years. They buy the brand, client list, and inventory relationships. Then they consolidate storage and administration. Would they verify ownership of every watch?" "They should, will they?" "That depends on who prepares the schedules." Caleb would prepare them. The next morning, every employee received a mandatory invitation to a company meeting at 10. Mine came to an old personal email address I had not used in years. A harmless founder was still useful as decoration. I arrived 5 minutes early, wearing a soft gray cardigan instead of my work coat. I carried no loop, no tools, and no notebook. Serena greeted me at the reception desk as if I were a visiting widow, rather than the woman whose name remained above the door. "How lovely that you came," she said. "I was told there would be cake." Her eyes searched mine for mockery. I gave her none. The workshop had been rearranged. Chairs faced a temporary stage beneath a blue banner bearing the words, "The Next Century of Voss & Bell." The company was 43 years old. Caleb always preferred the future when the past belonged to someone else. Nora sat in the front row beside Charles Pruitt. She held her hands tightly in her lap. Ellie stood at the back near the polishing room. He did not look at me. At 10 precisely, Caleb stepped onto the stage. He spoke first about Daniel. That was calculated. He described my husband as a visionary who would have embraced expansion, digital authentication, and global access. Daniel had hated corporate slogans and refused to own a mobile phone until 2009, but the dead cannot correct a speech. Then Caleb announced that Voss and Bell had entered an exclusive 30-day negotiation period with Aurelius Heritage Group. Several employees applauded, others looked stunned. Aurelius will provide the resources to preserve our craft for generations, he said. No one is losing a job, we are gaining a future. Serena stood beside the stage smiling. Caleb continued. As part of the proposed acquisition, all high-value client property would be transferred to Meridian Secured Logistics for consolidated appraisal and insurance review. The transfer would begin immediately and conclude before the end of the month. 30 days, Maya's voice returned to me. If the collateral disappeared, the lender would be paid first. Caleb displayed a polished video of Meridian's vaults. Stainless steel doors, biometric readers, climate-controlled rooms filled with blue light, a place designed to look safer than trust. When the video ended, Charles Pruitt rose. The board has unanimously endorsed the transaction, he announced. I looked at Nora. She did not clap. Caleb invited questions. A senior restorer named Paul asked whether clients had approved the transfers. Our standard custody agreements permit relocation for security and appraisal purposes, Caleb answered. That was partly true. They permitted temporary movement for restoration-related needs, not the use of property and acquisition financing. Another employee asked whether I would remain involved. Caleb smiled toward me. Aunt Maggie will always be the soul of Voss and Bell. We are establishing the honorary position of founder emeritus so she can enjoy the recognition she deserves without the burden of daily operations. Applause followed, not much enough. I stood slowly. Caleb's posture tightened, but I only asked, "Will there be cake now?" Laughter moved through the room. Gentle laughter, relieved laughter. The confused old woman had behaved exactly as expected. Caleb came down from the stage and kissed my cheek. "You did wonderfully," he whispered. He believed humiliation had made me manageable. After the meeting, I wandered through the workshop, saying goodbye to benches that were not yet gone. Near the loading area, I found a stack of new transfer crates. Each carried a Meridian barcode and a blank field for owner certification. The owner field had already been stamped, Voss and Bell Horological Restoration Inc., not client name. Not consignor, company owner. I reached toward one of the labels. Serena appeared behind me. "Those are not ready." I was admiring the printing. She stepped between me and the crates. "You should be careful back here. There are trip hazards. I seem to encounter many things people are afraid I might notice." Her smile cooled. Then she touched my arm and led me toward the front as if guiding someone away from traffic. That afternoon, Maya and I met in the parking lot of a public library. I told her about the 30-day transfer and the stamped ownership labels. "If those crates leave with false owner certifications, that strengthens the lender's position," she said. "And Caleb's exposure, only if we can document who authorized them, I will." She shook her head. "You will not steal a label or trespass. I heard you the first time. I am saying it again because you have the expression of a woman considering both." Before I could answer, my prepaid phone rang. Only Maya and Dr. Salter had the number. The caller was a woman named Helen Morris, one of our oldest clients. Her husband's Patek Philippe had been with Voss and Bell for restoration since January. It was a plain gold watch to most people, but her husband had worn it through 42 years of marriage. Helen's voice trembled. "Maggie, I received a call from a dealer in Boston. He thought I might want the chance to buy back my own watch." I looked at Maya. "What do you mean, buy it back?" "He sent me photographs. It is being offered privately tomorrow. Are you certain it is yours?" The case inscription says, "For Helen, when time is kind." I remembered engraving those words myself after her husband died. Helen began to cry. "The dealer says the seller has complete Voss and Bell provenance and legal title." Then she told me the asking price, $1,200,000. Helen Morris's watch was scheduled to be shown to a private buyer the next afternoon. That gave us less than 24 hours. Maya contacted the Boston dealer through an attorney who handled recovered collectibles. Helen provided photographs, repair receipts, and the original engraving order. The dealer agreed not to complete the sale, but he refused to reveal the seller without a subpoena. Can he hold the watch? I asked. For a day or two, Maya said. After that, he may return it. Then the seller must believe nothing has changed. Maya studied me across the library table. You have an idea, I have an apology to make. The next morning, I called Caleb and made my voice smaller than usual. I have been thinking about the meeting, I said. You were right. Silence answered first. Then came concern, polished and ready. Right about what? About the company, about me. I told him Daniel and I had built Voss and Bell for a different world, and perhaps I had mistaken resistance for loyalty to the past. Every sentence tasted false. Caleb accepted them like overdue payment. You've carried too much for too long, he said. No one blames you. I blamed myself. I accused Leo. I frightened Mrs. Bellwether. I embarrassed you in front of the board. You were under stress. I want to make it right. I asked for a special board meeting. By 3 that afternoon, Charles Pruitt, Nora, Serena, and the other directors sat around the glass conference table. I entered without notes and waited until everyone was looking at me. Then I apologized. I apologized to Charles for challenging his judgment. I apologized to Serena for questioning her provenance work. I apologized to Caleb for making succession harder than it needed to be. Nora stared at me with open confusion. I have spent my life repairing mechanisms, I told them. I assumed that because I understood the old system, I had the right to stop the new one. Charles nodded with solemn satisfaction. I will accept the founder emeritus position, I continued. I will support the Aurelius transaction publicly, and I will no longer interfere with custody, appraisal, or client placement. Caleb's fingers relaxed on the table. That was the moment he believed he had won. I reached into my handbag and removed a worn walnut box. Nora recognized it first. Aunt Maggie, no. I placed the box in front of Caleb and opened it. Inside lay Daniel's pocket watch. It was not the most valuable piece our company had ever handled. The case was plain 18-karat gold, rubbed thin at the edges by decades of use. The enamel dial carried a repaired crack near the center. Daniel had replaced the bow after dropping it on a stone floor during our second year in business. But collectors knew the watch. Daniel wore it in every photograph from the early years of Voss and Bell. He had used it to teach apprentices. The back carried our first workshop mark, cut by hand before we could afford a custom stamp. Caleb looked up at me. What are you doing? I want it included in the Newport gala. The room changed. The gala was meant to announce the Aurelius acquisition and auction, several approved pieces. Daniel's watch would give the event a story no marketing firm could manufacture. A founder's farewell, Serena said softly. I pretended the phrase did not wound me. I would like the proceeds to establish an apprentice scholarship in Daniel's name. That part was true. Nora shook her head. You always said it would stay in the family. I said many things before I understood that holding on can become another form of fear. Caleb lifted the box but did not touch the watch. This is extraordinarily generous, he said. It belongs to the company's history. No, Nora said. It belongs to you. Her voice broke on the final word. Caleb looked at her. One glance, Nora lowered her eyes. I signed a temporary consignment agreement prepared by Serena. I read every line. It authorized evaluation, photography, transport, and presentation at the gala. It did not transfer title. Before signing, I added one sentence in my own hand. Final sale subject to the consignier's written confirmation after physical inspection of the offered lot. Serena noticed. Standard procedure already covers that. Then the sentence changes nothing. She smiled and let it remain. People planning to substitute an object rarely fear a clause they expect the owner will be too confused to enforce. After the meeting, Caleb walked me to the elevator. I'm proud of you, he said. For one dangerous moment, I remembered the 13-year-old boy at my bench, struggling to open his father's watch without scratching it. Then the elevator doors reflected the man beside me. Tailored suit, calm smile, one hand resting possessively on Daniel's box. You'll take care of it, I asked. With my life, he had become comfortable lying. At home, I called Maya. You actually gave him Daniel's watch? She asked. Temporarily, that was not the plan. We did not have a plan. We had caution. Caution will not identify the chain of custody. Maya went quiet. What did you prepare before handing it over? For 3 nights, I had documented every screw, scratch, repair mark, and microscopic imperfection. Beneath the balance cock, Daniel had placed his own identifying pattern 38 years earlier. 3 shallow dots surrounding one deeper mark. No catalog mentioned it. Only Daniel and I had ever known. I prepared enough, I said. The next morning, Serena called. The watch photographed beautifully. There is one complication. For insurance purposes, all gala pieces must be moved to Meridian by tonight. That was not in the agreement. It is required by Aurelius. How will it be transported? Our private courier. I paused long enough to sound uncertain. All right? Wonderful. Caleb will handle everything. 10 minutes later, Eli sent a photograph to my prepaid phone. Daniel's walnut box sat open on the packing table. Beside it was a second box of the same size, the same wood and the same faded brass hinges. The second walnut box told me Caleb was no longer improvising. Someone had commissioned a replica of Daniel's presentation case before I ever offered the watch for the gala. The hinges had been aged, the wood darkened, even the small burn mark near the rear corner had been copied. My surrender had not inspired the substitution. It had completed a plan already waiting for the right object. I called Eli from the prepaid phone. Where is the original box now? Still on the packing table. And the second? Serena carried it into the imaging room. Do not follow her. I can see through the glass, Ellie. He lowered his voice. I understand. You do not understand. If Caleb suspects you, he will not simply fire you. He will blame the inventory discrepancies on the apprentice, who had physical access to every bench. The silence on the line changed. I never thought of that. That is why you must stop thinking like a witness and start thinking like someone they may need to sacrifice. I asked him to note the time and leave the building through the front entrance where the security cameras would record him. He was not to touch either box. After the call, I sat alone in my workroom staring at Daniel's documentation photographs. The temptation to drive to Voss and Bell and reclaim the watch was nearly unbearable. It was the only object I had left that still carried the wear of Daniel's daily hands. But if I removed it now, Caleb would know the confused widow had been performing. And we still did not know how many families had already lost something irreplaceable. At 6 that evening, Maya arrived carrying a banker's box and a bag of takeout food. You need to eat, she said. I need my husband's watch returned. You need evidence strong enough to recover everyone's property, including yours. She placed the food beside me and opened the box. Inside were corporate filings, insurance certificates, lien summaries, and copies of correspondence from North Atlantic Specialty Credit. How did you get these? A lawyer representing one of Caleb's creditors contacted the lender after noticing conflicting claims against the same inventory pool. He was willing to share documents with Helen Morris's counsel because her watch appears on one of the schedules. Is that legal? Yes, which is why it took longer than stealing them. Maya removed a document held together by a black clip. At the top were the words Collateral Verification Schedule. The first page listed watches by manufacturer, estimated value, storage location, and ownership status. Every entry was marked company owned. I recognized the first 3 pieces immediately. A perpetual calendar belonging to a retired surgeon in Connecticut. A split-seconds chronograph entrusted to us by a museum in New York. Helen Morris's engraved Patek Philippe. I turned the page. Mrs. Bellwether's repeater was listed at $2 million. The description claimed Voss and Bell had purchased it through a confidential estate liquidation. They invented ownership histories, I said. Serena's company certified them. How many? 23 watches pledged directly to North Atlantic. The declared collateral value exceeded $26 million, but the credit line had not remained at $8 million. Maya pointed to an amendment filed 12 days earlier. Caleb had requested an increase to $11.5 million, citing additional inventory scheduled for deposit before the Newport gala. Daniel's watch was meant to become part of the next draw. My surrender had not only given Caleb a symbolic centerpiece, it had given him another asset to borrow against. Where is the money? I asked. Some paid business expenses, some covered old debts. Nearly $3 million went to Orison Provenance Services. Serena, yes. Another $1 million moved through a consulting company, controlled by Charles Pruitt's son. Charles had praised my wisdom, defended Caleb's concern, and watched me sign my suspension with a grandfatherly expression. He had already been paid to help remove me. Maya turned to the international shipping records. 7 watches from the collateral schedule had been exported under temporary exhibition permits. None had returned. Geneva, Monaco, Singapore, she said. Private transactions could happen in any of those places. They sold pledged property abroad. Possibly we can prove export, not sale. Helen's watch reached Boston, and that dealer believed the seller had valid title. I looked at Serena's certification signature repeated across the pages. Caleb might have built the financing structure, but Serena had manufactured the histories that made stolen property appear legitimate. What happens when Aurelius buys the company? The sale proceeds repay North Atlantic. Caleb clears the lien, replaces missing client property with high-grade replicas, and leaves Aurelius holding the liability. Unless clients discover the substitutions, which is why the watches are being moved beyond your inspection. The structure finally came into focus. Caleb was not stealing one company, he was preparing to sell the evidence of his theft to another. I asked Maya whether the lender could freeze the warehouse immediately. They might, but the moment we alert them, Caleb knows the investigation has reached the financing. Then we wait, we document, we identify the 7 exported pieces, we keep Helen's dealer from returning hers, and we establish who directed each false certification. Waiting sounded civilized. When Maya said it, to me, it sounded like allowing a thief to continue winding a mechanism that would eventually strike. My phone rang. Ellie. I answered at once. They moved Daniel's watch, he whispered. Which box? I don't know. They closed the imaging room blinds. When they opened them again, Serena had sealed one box for Meridian and Caleb carried the other upstairs. Did you see the watch? No, a door shut on his end. I have to go. The call ended. Maya continued reviewing the insurance documents while I stared at the 2 possible destinations of Daniel's watch. Then she stopped turning pages. What is it? I asked. She pulled out a claim form issued by Meridian's insurer 3 weeks earlier. The reported loss involved a vintage chronograph allegedly missing after an internal transfer. The insurer had already approved a payment of $900,000 to North Atlantic as loss payee. Attached to the claim was a photograph of the missing watch. I had seen it that morning. It was sitting beneath a glass dome in Caleb's office. The chronograph beneath the glass dome had already been declared lost, insured, and paid out. Yet Caleb displayed it in his office like a trophy. That single fact connected the false serial numbers, the collateral loan, and the insurance claims more clearly than anything we had found before. He was not merely substituting movements to hide missing watches. He was creating multiple financial lives for the same object. One watch could be pledged to a lender, reported lost to an insurer, and then sold privately under a different provenance. The mechanism was elegant in the way a trap can be elegant. It was also fragile. Every version of the watch depended on the same lie, that no one who truly understood its history would examine it closely. Maya photographed the insurance claim and placed it beside the collateral schedule. We need the original claim file, she said. Adjuster notes, inspection images, transfer records, and the signature authorizing payment. Caleb's, maybe Serena's, maybe someone at Meridian, and the watch in his office? Do not touch it. I was not planning to steal it. You were looking at the photograph the way people look at open windows. I ignored that. The following morning, I called Leo Marsh. He answered with, "Have you found another crime to accuse me of?" Yes. There was a pause. That was not the answer I expected. Meet me at my house. He arrived at noon, carrying a metal tool case that looked older than Caleb. He refused coffee, removed his overcoat, and followed me into the workroom. I placed the 3 duplicate bridges beneath the inspection lamp. Leo examined the first in silence, then the second. By the third, his irritation had become concentration. These numbers were cut by the same hand, he said. Caleb, I did not say that. The spacing is identical. The pressure is identical. Whoever held the graver leaned too heavily into the final stroke. He rotated one bridge beneath the light. Good work, but rushed. I showed him the copied double crescent mark. Leo opened his tool case and removed a small brass plate bearing several test impressions. His genuine mark touched the edge of the screw recess exactly as he had said. The copied version stopped short. Your punch was sold when you closed the shop, I said. My equipment was liquidated through Harrow Industrial Auctions. Do you have the records? I had debts. I was not sentimental about invoices. Can you remember who bought the punch set? No. He glanced at the duplicate bridges again. But Harrow can. Maya joined us by telephone while Leo called the auction company. The receptionist initially refused to release buyer information. Leo became louder, Maya became quieter. Quiet 1. The sale had taken place 6 years earlier. Lot 184 included engraving punches, staking tools, and Leo's custom workshop marks. The buyer was listed as East Bay Technical Consulting. I had never heard the name, Maya had. She searched the state registry while we waited. East Bay was dissolved 3 years ago, she said. Its manager was Caleb Ward. Leo sat back. The room went still. Caleb had purchased the tools long before the Aurelius sale, long before my suspension, and long before the first false insurance claim we had identified. This was not a desperate decision made to solve a recent debt. He had been preparing the ability to manufacture history. Leo looked at me. You were wrong to accuse me. I know, but not as wrong as I hoped. That was the closest thing to forgiveness he offered. We spent the afternoon examining the substituted bellwether movement and the 3 discarded bridges. Leo identified modern graver marks. I documented differences in aging. Maya built a chart connecting each serial number to its client, insurance status, collateral entry, and known location. By 4 o'clock, we had the beginning of a case. Not enough for a courtroom, enough for a strategy. We need to separate the crimes, Maya said through the speakerphone. The lender fraud, insurance fraud, and theft are connected, but each requires its own proof. Leo pointed toward the bellwether movement. This proves substitution. It proves an undocumented substitution. Maya corrected. Caleb will claim emergency conservation, the false serial number. He will blame an employee, the copied mark. He will blame Leo's old shop. Leo muttered something unsuitable for an insurance professional. Maya continued, to trap Caleb, we need him to personally certify 3 things he knows are false: ownership, authenticity, and chain of custody. The gala, I said. Yes, Aurelius would require warranties before completing the acquisition. The insurer would require condition reports for every auction lot. If Caleb personally signed those documents after we had established the real history of Daniel's watch, he could not dismiss the fraud as a clerical mistake. But we still needed to know which box contained the original. We can examine Lot 27 publicly, I said, only if the auctioneer has a legal reason to stop the sale, Maya replied. The consignor's inspection clause, you added that yourself? Yes, for the first time that day, Maya sounded pleased. Leo did not. You gave Daniel's watch to a thief? I gave Caleb an object whose every mark I know. That is not the same as protecting it. No, I looked at the empty space on my workbench, where Daniel's box had rested for 4 years. It is the cost of making him confident. The words sounded colder than I felt. We agreed on the next steps. Maya would secure the insurer's cooperation through Helen's attorney and trace the lost payment authorization. Leo would reconstruct the history of his stolen tools and prepare an expert comparison of the false workshop marks. I would continue playing the failing founder and obtain the gala catalog before publication. Eli would observe only what he could see during ordinary work. No trespassing, no stolen files, no reckless heroics. That evening Nora came to my house unannounced. She stood on the porch holding Owen's cardiology envelope. I need to tell you something, she said. Her voice was barely audible. I let her inside. She sat at my kitchen table but did not remove her coat. Caleb knows someone is checking the collateral filings, she whispered. North Atlantic called Charles this morning. Does he suspect me? He suspects everyone. She pushed the envelope toward me. Inside was not a medical bill. It was a copy of a backdated inventory certification bearing Nora's electronic signature. 23 watches were listed as company-owned. I did not sign this, she said, but my credentials were used. Before I could answer, my prepaid phone rang. Leo's number appeared on the screen. His breathing was uneven. I found something on the bellwether bridge, he said. A cut beneath the serial plate. What kind of cut? The kind made when someone removes the numbered section from one movement and welds it onto another. He paused. Maggie, they are not only restamping numbers, they are transplanting identities. Transplanting identities was the phrase Leo used. It was accurate. Caleb's people were not merely changing serial numbers. They were cutting numbered sections from authentic movements and attaching them to substitutes. To anyone checking a registry, the watch appeared legitimate. To anyone who understood metal solder and wear, the history had been surgically rewritten. That discovery gave us a method. It did not yet give us a trap. Nora remained at my kitchen table, still wearing her coat, while Leo's voice faded from the prepaid phone. The backdated inventory certification lay between us. 23 watches, 23 false claims of company ownership. Nora, I said, who has access to your credentials? Caleb, the outside IT administrator. Charles, if he requests an emergency override, did you ever share your password? No, her answer came too quickly. I waited. She pressed both palms against the table. Once, she whispered. Last winter, Owen was in Boston for testing, and payroll had to be released. Caleb said he would submit it for me. Did you change the password afterward? No, there was shame in her face, but also relief. Secrets become heavier when they finally have a name. Did you know client watches were being pledged? No. Did you approve any ownership schedules? I approved inventory lists. Caleb said Aurelius needed values for due diligence. The ownership column was added later. Can you prove that? The accounting system keeps version histories, but Charles ordered the audit log archived off-site. Where? She shook her head. I don't know. I looked at Owen's envelope. Nora followed my eyes. Caleb pays the supplemental policy that covers his specialists, she said. He told me if I disrupted the sale, the company might terminate the plan. There it was, not a threat against Nora, a threat against her child. Caleb understood which spring to tighten in every person around him. I need you to do nothing reckless. I said, you think I'm helping him. I think fear has already made several decisions for you. Her eyes filled. That isn't fair. No, it is simply true. She stood as if she might leave. Then she sat down again. What can I do? Continue exactly as you have. Do not search files you would not normally access. Do not warn anyone. And if Caleb asks whether I seem confused, tell him yes. Nora looked wounded. That is part of the trap, I said. Not a betrayal. She nodded. But she did not look convinced. The next morning, Maya, Leo, and I met in my workroom. Daniel's documentation photographs covered the bench. I had taken them before surrendering the watch. The repaired dial crack, the worn bow, the irregular teeth on the third wheel, and every mark left by 4 decades of service. Beneath the balance cock was the detail that mattered most. 3 shallow dots around 1 deeper point. Daniel had made the pattern with a hand graver in 1984, after rebuilding the movement. It was not a secret code. It was simply his habit, a private signature hidden where no owner would see it. Caleb could copy the case. He could reproduce the walnut box. He could even transplant the numbered section. But unless he knew where to look, he could not reproduce Daniel's hand. Leo examined the pattern through a loupe. This identifies the original movement, he said, but only if an independent expert verifies your photographs were taken before delivery. Maya placed a folder on the bench. That is why we need a neutral inspection. Through Helen Morris's attorney, Maya had contacted the insurer covering the Newport gala. The insurer did not yet know the full scope of Caleb's scheme, but Helen's stolen watch and the duplicate claims had given them reason to demand additional controls. They agreed to send a private loss prevention examiner to document Daniel's watch before it entered Meridian's custody. The examiner's name was Thomas Reed. He arrived that afternoon carrying 2 calibrated cameras, tamper-evident seals, and none of the curiosity that makes investigations dangerous. I told him only that a disputed family heirloom required enhanced chain of custody protection. He photographed the watch under visible and ultraviolet light. He recorded the movement number, measured case weight, and captured the hidden dot pattern through magnification. Then he placed the watch in a clear inner container. The container was sealed with a numbered strip. The walnut box was sealed separately. Finally, both were placed inside a transport case fitted with an impact logger and a one-time electronic tag. What happens if the case is opened? I asked. The tag records the exact time. Reed said, but it does not stop anyone. That is not its purpose. Maya looked at me sharply. She understood. A lock prevents an act. A seal proves it happened. The documentation was copied to the insurer, Helen's attorney, and a secure repository controlled by Maya. I kept no sole copy that Caleb could accuse me of altering. When the private courier arrived, Reed transferred the sealed case at my front door. My exterior security camera recorded the exchange. The courier signed for the tag number and departed. For the first time since surrendering Daniel's watch, I felt a small measure of control return. Then Leo placed a second object on my bench. It was an unfinished replica movement, assembled from period-correct parts, and fitted with one of the duplicate bridges. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "A former employee of mine bought a box of scrap from Harrow's liquidation." "Your nephew did not purchase everything." Leo rotated the movement. "We can demonstrate how the false identities were built without touching any client property." Maya added it to the evidence list. The plan now had several layers. The insurer would hold the pre-transfer inspection. Leo would prepare a technical report on the transplanted serial plates and copied workshop mark. Maya would continue tracing the lender certifications. I would ensure Caleb personally guaranteed title and authenticity at the gala. And Nora, without knowing the full mechanism, would preserve any ordinary records that crossed her desk. No single person held the entire trap. That mattered. Caleb could pressure one of us. He could not erase all of us at once. 2 hours after the courier left my house, Thomas Reed called. "The transport case arrived at Meridian," he said. "The electronic tag remained intact. That should have reassured me. It did not." At 7 that evening, Maya sent a link to a security recording obtained through the insurer's authorized review of the courier handoff area. The video showed the sealed transport case placed on a stainless steel table at Meridian. The courier signed the receipt and walked away. For 11 seconds the case remained alone. Then Serena entered the frame carrying an identical case. She looked directly toward the camera and smiled before switching them. Serena's smile into the Meridian camera told me 2 things. First, she knew the handoff area was recorded. Second, she believed the recording could not hurt her. The footage showed only a case exchange. Serena could claim the first container had been damaged, mislabeled, or sent for secondary screening. Without opening the replacement, we could not prove which case held Daniel's watch. Maya wanted the insurer to seize both. I refused. "If we stop them now, Caleb calls it a procedural misunderstanding. If we wait, the original may disappear," she said. "It may already have disappeared. That is not an argument for giving them more time. No, it is an argument for making Caleb certify the lie himself." Thomas Reed filed an internal exception report and requested enhanced tracking on both cases. Meridian was not warned about the suspected substitution. The insurer simply recorded every scan, door entry, and custody signature connected to the 2 container numbers. At Voss & Bell, I continued performing decline. I arrived Friday wearing my magnifying visor backward. I asked Paul whether Daniel had approved the new benches. I spent 20 minutes sorting brass screws into the wrong trays while Caleb watched from the conference room. He looked less relaxed than before. Someone had told him North Atlantic's collateral department was reviewing its files. He did not know why. Suspicion had entered the mechanism, and suspicion creates friction. Eli approached carrying a tray of inexpensive pocket watch movements. He placed one before me and whispered, "The gala catalog is on the shared server. Do not download it. I already took pictures. Delete them. There's a private appendix. It lists ownership certificates, Ellie. I thought you needed them. I need you employed and unsuspected." Caleb opened the conference room door. "Everything all right?" I picked up a screwdriver by the blade. "This tool is broken," I said. Caleb crossed the workshop and turned it in my fingers. "You're holding the wrong end." Several employees looked away. Eli gave a nervous laugh and carried the tray toward polishing. That laugh was his mistake. It was too quick and too loud. Caleb watched him leave. I stayed another half hour, then drove home by the most visible route possible. At 4:12, my prepaid phone vibrated. A photograph filled the screen. It showed the gala appendix on Eli's computer. Lot 27 was listed as property of Voss & Bell, supported by a full warranty of title signed electronically by Caleb. Before I could save it, another message appeared. "Sorry, wrong chat." My stomach tightened. Eli had sent the photograph to the company restoration group. Caleb, Serena, Nora, and every senior employee had received it. I called him, no answer. The second call went directly to voicemail. Maya arrived 20 minutes later. Leo followed carrying his tool case, and an expression suggesting he blamed modern technology for human stupidity. We assume Caleb saw it, Maya said. He saw it. What does Eli know? Enough to be frightened, not enough to explain the plan alone. Leo looked toward the window. Your nephew will search his locker and his phone, Maya added, possibly his apartment if Eli gives consent under pressure. I opened the drawer beneath my workbench. It was empty. The black cloth notebook I had carried openly during my recent visits was already taped beneath the bottom drawer of my former office at Voss & Bell. I had planted it 3 days earlier, before Daniel's watch left my house. Most pages contained grocery lists and timing results from worthless practice movements. The final 12 contained a false investigation. According to the notebook, I believed Serena was acting alone. I had written that she was stealing watches, forging Caleb's approval, and storing originals in a rented locker near Harbor Street. None of it was true. You prepared a decoy before Eli made the mistake, Maya said. I prepared for curiosity. This is more than curiosity now. The best falsehood is one a frightened man discovers for himself. Leo read a photograph I had kept of one page. Caleb remains naive but innocent. You expect him to enjoy that. I expect him to believe I still love him enough to excuse what is in front of me. I returned to the company. Caleb's car remained outside. Inside, the workshop was unusually quiet. Ellie's bench was empty, his apron hung from its peg, but his loop and personal tools were gone. Nora stood near accounting. Where is he? Caleb sent him home. Did he take Eli's phone? He asked to review it. Ellie refused. That gave me a small measure of relief. Where is Caleb? In your old office. The door at the far end of the workshop stood open. Caleb emerged carrying a cardboard archive box. Aunt Maggie, he said, too pleasantly. What brings you back? I left my notebook. His gaze sharpened. What kind? My recipes, I think. I searched my handbag twice, allowing confusion to settle over my face. Caleb took my elbow. We'll look for it. You should go home. His voice remained kind, but his eyes had become precise. For 1 second, I wondered whether I had underestimated him. Then I let him lead me outside. Across the street, Maya sat in her parked car, pretending to read a newspaper. I did not look at her. At home, we waited. No call came from Eli. At 9:30, Thomas Reed reported that one Meridian case had been moved to a private inspection room under Serena's authorization. The second remained in general storage. At 10:14, my old office alarm logged an after-hours entry. At 10:21, Caleb found the notebook. The hiding place was obvious enough to reward him and private enough to feel real. 5 minutes later, a Meridian transport order was created for one sealed case. Destination, a rented storage facility near Harbor Street, the false location in my notebook. Caleb had taken the bait. Then Nora called me, crying, "He knows the notebook was planted," she whispered. "He found something inside it that you didn't put there." "What did he find?" I asked. Nora struggled to steady her breathing. "A photograph." "What photograph?" "The macro image of Daniel's hidden mark. The 3 shallow dots and the deep one beneath the balance cock." For a moment, I could hear nothing but the faint hum of my refrigerator. I had not placed that image in the decoy notebook. Only 4 people possessed a copy. Maya, Leo, Thomas Reed, and me. Then I understood. "Ellie," I said. Nora began crying harder. "He printed it after he sent the catalog page to the wrong group. He thought Caleb might search his phone, so he hid the photograph in your notebook. He believed you would come back for it. Instead, Caleb had found it. The single feature we believed he could not reproduce was no longer secret." "Where is Eli?" "Caleb suspended him. Serena took his building pass and walked him outside." "Did he leave safely?" "I think so. You think?" I watched him cross the parking lot. Then Caleb took my phone. The plan had not merely developed a crack. A critical wheel had broken loose inside it. Caleb now knew I was not confused. He knew someone inside the company had been feeding me information. He knew Daniel's watch carried a hidden identifying pattern. And because he possessed the watch, he could copy that pattern onto a substitute before the gala. "Listen carefully," I told Nora. "You are going to behave as though you are terrified of me." "I am terrified of Caleb, not me." "What do I tell him?" "That I pressured you, that I have been manipulating Eli and trying to destroy the acquisition because I cannot accept retirement." He won't believe me. He will if you give him something he wants. What? The truth, arranged in the wrong order. I told her to admit that I had asked questions about collateral schedules and insurance claims. She could reveal that Maya Ortiz was advising me. Caleb would discover that soon anyway. But Nora was not to mention Leo's technical report, Thomas Reed's inspection, or the insurer's tracking of both Meridian cases. Most importantly, she was not to defend me. Fearful people defend themselves first. Caleb expected that. After the call, I contacted Maya and Leo. Maya arrived within 40 minutes. Leo came an hour later with an empty place in his tool case. My comparison plates are gone, he said. What happened? Someone entered my workshop. The door had not been forced. A rear window had been opened using a copied service key kept by the building manager. The genuine test impressions of Leo's workshop stamp, along with his notes on the transplanted serial plates, had disappeared. Caleb was removing every comparison he knew about. Did you keep copies? Maya asked. Photographs where? Leo tapped his forehead. Maya looked unimpressed. Memory is not evidence. I sent 2 images to my former apprentice. That is better. His former apprentice lived in Maine and still possessed several movements, serviced by Leo, before his retirement. They could provide independent examples of the genuine workshop mark. But obtaining them would take time. Time was the next thing Caleb took from us. At 11 the following morning, Aurelius announced that the Newport Gala had been moved from Saturday evening to Thursday. 48 hours earlier, the official explanations cited an approaching coastal storm. The forecast showed only light rain. The acquisition signing would now take place immediately after the auction, rather than the following Monday. Caleb intended to certify the inventory, complete the sale, and receive the first distribution before we could rebuild the technical evidence he had stolen. Maya requested an emergency meeting with the gala insurer. Their attorney agreed the duplicate claims were concerned but refused to stop the event without formal proof that Lot 27 had been altered. The pre-transfer inspection proves its condition before Meridian, I said. It proves one case contained the original when Reed sealed it, Maya replied. Serena exchanged the case before intake. Caleb will argue the substitution was a security protocol. The electronic tags? One reached Meridian intact, the other moved under authorized credentials. Suspicious, but not conclusive. What about the camera footage? It shows Serena moving containers. It does not show her opening either. I turned toward Leo. Can Caleb reproduce Daniel's mark? Yes, so we have lost the watch. Not necessarily, if the hidden mark was our proof. It was one proof, Leo interrupted. Not the watch's entire history. He enlarged Reed's pre-transfer photographs on my computer. Daniel's original movement carried dozens of microscopic relationships. The angle of the balance spring, a repaired tooth on the third wheel, old solder beneath the pendant, uneven oxidation around 2 screw holes. Caleb could copy a visible pattern. He could not duplicate 40 years of interacting wear in 48 hours. Then we identify it by the whole movement, I said. Leo shook his head. No auction audience will understand a 2-hour technical examination. They do not have to. Maya saw the change in my face. What are you thinking? We stopped trying to prove which watch is original before the gala. That was the entire purpose of the inspection. No, the purpose was to make Caleb believe authenticity was the only danger. I walked to the wall where our timeline hung. Caleb had personally certified company ownership of client property. Serena had certified false provenance. North Atlantic had accepted those certifications. The insurer had paid claims on watches still under Caleb's control. Lot 27 did not need to expose every crime. It only needed to force Caleb to make one irreversible declaration in front of the insurer, Aurelius, the auction house, and the buyer. Then we could open the rest. Maya read the draft gala warranty. He must sign this before bidding begins, she said. It guarantees title, authenticity, and uninterrupted custody. He will sign now that he suspects you. He moved the gala forward instead of canceling it. That means he still needs the sale more than he fears me. Leo closed his tool case, and if he removes Lot 27. Then Aurelius asks why its centerpiece vanished after the consignor raised concerns. For the first time since Nora's call, the plan began moving again. Changed, but moving at dusk. Nora came to my back door. She had a bruise around one wrist where someone had gripped her. I let her inside without asking whether it was Caleb. She removed a folded document from inside her coat. "I found this in the ordinary compliance packet," she said. "I was required to countersign it, so I made a copy." It was a work order from Meridian. The electrical remediation had not been scheduled for after the gala. The fire suppression system would be disabled at midnight Wednesday, 20 hours before Lot 27 reached the auction stage. And beside the authorization line was Nora's forged signature. The Geneva registration appeared on Thomas Reed's tablet in plain black letters. Same manufacturer, same movement number, same claimed year of production, 2 watches, separated by more than 3,000 miles, carrying one mechanical identity. A murmur spread across the ballroom. Caleb stepped away from the auction table. "That is a database error," he said. His voice remained controlled, but his right hand had closed around the edge of the podium. The auctioneer looked toward the insurer's attorney. "Are we suspending the lot?" "Yes," she replied. Immediately, Serena moved toward the tablet. "International registries duplicate legacy numbers all the time. You cannot disrupt an $800,000 sale over a clerical irregularity." Thomas Reed did not hand her the device. "This number was entered into the Geneva system this morning with supporting photographs. So someone copied the catalog. The Geneva entry predates the public release of the catalog by 6 hours." That stopped her. Not for long. Serena turned to the room and smiled with professional regret. "This is precisely why private authentication disputes should not be performed as theater." I looked at Caleb. "You signed the warranty." He glanced at the paper on the table, as though seeing it for the first time. The document guaranteed that Voss & Bell possessed legal title, that the watch had remained in uninterrupted authorized custody, and that no material part had been replaced without disclosure. 3 declarations, 3 lies. Caleb lifted the microphone. "My aunt is unwell," he said. "She has been under medical review for cognitive impairment. Several people in this room are aware of that." Charles Pruitt rose from his seat. "This is true. The board acted only after documented incidents of confusion and unsafe handling." He sounded regretful. He always sounded regretful when helping someone else lose power. I placed both hands on the auction table. "My medical screening was inconclusive, Dr. Salter never diagnosed cognitive impairment." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "You deliberately failed the examination. I deliberately allowed you to believe what you had already decided." The audience became completely still. There is a moment in every repair when the case opens and the decorative surface ceases to matter. The mechanism underneath may be dirty, broken, or altered, but at least it is honest. That moment had arrived. The insurer's attorney instructed the auctioneer to open Lot 27. Serena stepped forward. "You cannot do that without the consignor's approval." "I am the consignor," I said. "You transferred full presentation authority to Voss & Bell. Read the final handwritten line." The auctioneer found it at the bottom of the consignment agreement. "Final sale subject to the consignor's written confirmation after physical inspection of the offered lot." Caleb looked at Serena. She had allowed the clause to remain because she believed I would never understand when to use it. I removed my loupe from my handbag. For the first time that evening, I stopped walking like a woman who needed assistance. I climbed the stage without touching the rail. A few people noticed. Caleb noticed all of it. The auctioneer unlocked the display case and lifted Daniel's watch onto a black examination pad. Thomas Reed positioned 2 cameras above the table. The feed appeared on the large screen behind us. I opened the gold back. The movement was clean, bright, and convincing. The blued screw I had placed on the velvet belonged beside the balance bridge. Its color matched, its dimensions matched, but the original screw in Daniel's watch had been darkened by 38 years of heat, oil, and handling. The one inside Lot 27 had been made recently. I removed it. A small crescent of untouched metal appeared beneath the screw head. "The bridge was altered after the watch left my possession," I said. Caleb turned toward the audience. "She repairs watches. Of course she can manufacture a discrepancy." Thomas Reed opened his inspection file. "These photographs were taken before the sealed transport," he said. "The screw present at that time had different oxidation and a different slot profile. The screen displayed the images side by side. The difference was small, once shown. It was undeniable. Caleb shifted his attack. Then Meridian mishandled the watch. The insurer's attorney replied. Meridian received one sealed case and later processed a second under Serena Klein's authorization. Serena's face did not move. Charles stood. None of this proves criminal intent, it proves disputed custody. Maya entered from the rear of the ballroom, carrying a red portfolio identical to the one I had seen Serena bring into our conference room weeks earlier. She handed copies to the insurer, Aurelius's risk officer, and the auctioneer. The ownership warranty for Lot 27 is not an isolated error, Maya said. It is one entry in a financing schedule containing 23 watches that Voss & Bell does not own. Caleb stared at her. And you are? Maya Ortiz, forensic accountant retained by 3 affected owners. The large screen changed. Helen Morris's engraved watch appeared beside the North Atlantic collateral schedule and the private sale listing from Boston. Then came Mrs. Bellwether's repeater, then the chronograph beneath the glass dome in Caleb's office. Maya spoke without drama. North Atlantic advanced funds against these items after receiving certifications that they were company property. At least one watch was later reported lost, generating an insurance payment while remaining inside Mr. Ward's control. People began standing. Collectors reached for their phones. Aurelius executives gathered around their attorney. 2 journalists moved closer to the stage. Caleb pointed at Nora. She managed the inventory certifications. Every face turned toward her. Nora remained seated for one terrible second. Then she rose. My credentials were used, she said, but I also approved earlier schedules without verifying the ownership column. The admission visibly hurt her. It also destroyed Caleb's attempt to make her the sole culprit. I was afraid, Nora continued. That does not make what I signed correct. Charles tried to leave. A fire official blocked the aisle. Mr. Pruitt, we need to discuss a work order disabling the Meridian suppression system tonight. Charles stopped. The room broke into overlapping voices. Caleb reached for the warranty document, perhaps intending to tear it, but the auctioneer pulled it away. You signed in front of witnesses, I told him. Destroying the page will not destroy the signature. His composure finally cracked. You gave me that watch, I consigned it. You wanted it sold. I wanted you to state, in your own hand, that you owned what you knew belonged to someone else. Caleb looked from me to Maya, then to Nora. At last he understood that no single accusation held the trap together. His own declarations did. Serena stepped away from him. The movement was slight, but Caleb felt it. He turned. She raised both hands where everyone could see them. I prepared market reports, she said calmly. I never handled custody, pledged collateral, or authorized any substitution. Caleb stared at her in disbelief. Serena looked directly at the insurer's attorney. Every fraudulent instruction came from Caleb Ward. Then Thomas Reed placed the Meridian security log on the screen. The final entry showed Serena's credentials opening the private inspection room at 2:13 that morning. Serena's credentials had opened the Meridian inspection room at 2:13 that morning. The timestamp remained on the screen behind us while the ballroom seemed to contract around her. For the first time that evening, Serena lost control of her face. Only briefly. Then she turned toward Caleb with the smooth precision of a woman changing strategy in the middle of a negotiation. You told me the transfer had been approved, she said. Caleb stared at her. You designed the transfer. I designed the documentation process. You switched the cases because you said the first seal was defective. The lie was reasonable enough to survive a casual conversation. It could not survive the records Maya had assembled. She opened the red portfolio and removed a second set of documents. These are payment instructions from Orison Provenance Services, she said. Each corresponds to a watch, transferred through Serena Klein's credentials. The large screen displayed a series of invoices, research consultation, private placement, export coordination. The language changed, the bank accounts did not. Money from the private sale of client watches flowed into Orison, then through 2 shell companies, before returning as loans to Caleb's acquisition vehicle. Serena had not simply prepared reports. She had financed Caleb's scheme with the proceeds of the theft. This proves consulting income, Serena said. Maya nodded. Then you should be able to explain why Helen Morris's watch was photographed on your apartment table 3 days before it appeared in Boston. A new image filled the screen. Serena's dining room was visible in the background. The watch lay beside a provenance certificate bearing the false statement that it had come from a private European estate. The photograph had been recovered from the Boston dealer's submission file. After Helen's attorney notified him of the ownership dispute, Serena's name did not appear in the image. Her reflection did. A narrow mirror behind the table captured her, holding the camera. Caleb laughed once. It was not amusement. It was the sound of a man discovering that the person beside him had prepared an escape route he had never been shown. "You said there were no photographs," he whispered. Serena did not look at him. "You said the owners would never know." That sentence traveled farther than she intended. 3 collectors in the front row stood at once. The auctioneer called for order, but order had already left the ballroom. People were no longer watching a family dispute. They were calculating whether their own heirlooms had been sold, pledged, copied, or declared lost. Charles Pruitt moved again toward the side exit. This time, 2 investigators in plain clothes entered through it. One showed him identification. Charles's expression remained composed, but his hand closed tightly around the back of a chair. Maya displayed a payment ledger from the consulting company, controlled by Charles's son. 9 transfers had arrived during the 18 months in which the board approved new custody policies, restricted my access, and authorized the Aurelius negotiation. The total was $640,000. Charles looked at me. "Maggie, this is not what it appears to be. I have heard that phrase often lately. My son's firm provided legitimate transaction advice. Did that advice include declaring client property to be company inventory? I never reviewed individual watches. But you voted to suspend the person who did." His jaw tightened. "You were behaving erratically. I was behaving inconveniently." The plainclothes investigator asked Charles to step away from the table. He refused until the fire official placed the forged suppression order in front of him. Charles's signature authorized emergency electrical work at Meridian. Nora's forged countersignature appeared beneath it. The official pointed to a line near the bottom. The contractor named in the order had lost its license 2 years earlier. The address belonged to another company, controlled by Charles's son. Charles stopped denying. He began requesting an attorney. Caleb watched him being escorted toward the rear of the ballroom. Then he turned on Nora. "You gave them the work order." "Yes, you signed it. My signature was copied." "You signed other schedules." Nora stood beside the accounting table, small beneath the chandeliers and exposed before everyone she had worked with. She could have lied. She could have blamed every document on stolen credentials. Instead, she opened the folder she had carried all evening. "I approved the first 2 inventory schedules," she said. The admission landed heavily. I had known she was not entirely innocent. Hearing her say it aloud still hurt. "I did not verify the ownership fields," she continued. "Caleb told me the watches were temporary reference assets being used for internal valuation. I knew that explanation was incomplete. Why did you sign?" The Aurelius attorney asked. Nora looked toward me, then toward the floor. "My son needed cardiac care outside our regular network. Caleb controlled the supplemental policy. He reminded me of that every time I asked questions." Caleb raised both hands. "I paid for Owen's treatment. You used his treatment to keep me obedient. I protected your family. You protected yourself." Nora removed a flash drive from the folder. "This contains the accounting system's automatic email backups." Caleb ordered the audit log archived, but the software sent weekly change summaries to an old compliance account he forgot existed. Maya took the drive. The summaries recorded every altered ownership field, every backdated valuation, and every time Caleb's administrator credentials entered Nora's account. They also showed Serena approving export paperwork and Charles authorizing consulting payments. Each person had touched a different wheel. Together, they had powered the same machine. Caleb looked at me then, not with anger, with disbelief. "You planned all of this?" "No." That answer surprised him. "I prepared for what you might do. You made the decisions." The investigators approached the stage. One asked Caleb and Serena to remain where they were, while search warrants were executed at Voss and Bell, Orison's office, and Meridian. Serena immediately asked whether she was under arrest. The investigator said, "Not at this moment." Caleb seized on the phrase, "Then this event is over." He stepped down from the stage. No one stopped him. For 3 steps, he seemed to believe he had found a path through the room. Then Thomas Reed's phone rang. He answered, listened, and handed the device to the lead investigator. The investigator's expression changed. "The Meridian search team has entered the private vault," he announced. They recovered 17 watches matching the disputed collateral list. Relief moved through the collectors. It did not last. They also found dismantled movements, duplicate cases, and packaging prepared for destruction. Caleb stopped walking. The investigator listened again. Near the fire control panel, they found 2 containers of accelerant, an unauthorized timing relay, and the original suppression inspection report. Nora gripped the table. The forged work order had not been administrative cover. It was the final preparation for a fire. Then the investigator added one more detail. The timing relay was already active. It had less than 40 minutes remaining. 40 minutes was enough time to destroy $26 million in watches and 43 years of trust. The fire officials did not allow anyone to remain in the ballroom. Guests were moved through the front doors into the rain while Newport police sealed the building. Collectors stood beneath umbrellas, clutching phones, coats, and auction paddles, as though those objects could protect them from what they had just learned. Caleb tried to leave with the crowd. The lead investigator stopped him at the door. "You need to remain available. I have cooperated fully. You attempted to sell property that did not belong to you while a device was counting down inside the warehouse where the remaining collateral was stored." Caleb looked toward me. "You did this," he said. His voice no longer carried the warmth, concern, or polished patience he had used for months. It sounded like the 13-year-old boy who broke rules before anyone else could impose them. "No," I answered. "You did." Serena stood several feet away with an attorney already speaking into her ear. She had stopped looking at Caleb entirely. Charles Pruitt sat alone beneath the awning, his tuxedo wet at the shoulders, while investigators photographed the forged fire suppression order beside him. Their power had not disappeared in one dramatic instant. It was being removed piece by piece. Their phones were collected under warrant. Their access credentials were disabled. Aurelius suspended the acquisition. North Atlantic froze every account connected to the collateral facility. The Gala insurer issued an emergency hold on all pending claims. Within 30 minutes, Caleb went from commanding a room of wealthy investors to asking permission to use the restroom. At Meridian, the fire team reached the private vault with 17 minutes remaining. The timing relay had been attached to an improvised ignition system, beside stacked packaging, solvents, and wooden storage crates. The accelerant had been placed carefully enough to make the first flames appear to begin near an overloaded electrical panel. Had the fire started, the disabled suppression system would have allowed it to spread through the records room before reaching the main vault. The watches might have survived inside their steel cabinets. The paper trail would not. That was the purpose, not destruction for its own sake, erasure. The device was disconnected before ignition. By midnight, investigators had recovered 17 watches from the disputed collateral schedule, 6 original movements removed from client cases, dozens of replica dials, and a cabinet of numbered plates waiting to be transplanted. Daniel's walnut box was found in Serena's private inspection room. The watch inside was a replica. For 9 days I did not know where the original was. Those were the longest 9 days of the entire investigation. I could accept losing money. I could rebuild a company. I could survive Caleb's betrayal. But Daniel's watch had rested against his body for most of our marriage. Its scratches came from our workbench, our kitchen table, and the stone wall where he dropped it while trying to kiss me in the rain. No replacement could carry that history. On the 9th morning, Maya called. Customs authorities in Geneva had detained a broker attempting to move several watches into a private Freeport vault. One carried Daniel's movement number. Leo and I flew there with the insurer's examiner. The case had been polished. The bow had been replaced. Someone had tried to remove the hidden pattern beneath the balance cock. They failed. The 3 shallow dots were scarred, but visible. The deeper point remained untouched. When Leo handed the watch to me, I could not wind it. My hands did not tremble from age. They trembled because Daniel had come home carrying evidence of what had been done to him. Not every watch returned. One belonged to a woman named Margaret Ellis, whose husband had worn it during the Korean War and through 58 years of marriage. Caleb's records showed that the case had been melted, the dial sold to a collector in Paris, and the movement broken apart for use in 3 replicas. We recovered 2 wheels and the engraved case back. That was all. Mrs. Ellis sat across from me in my workroom while I explained what could not be repaired. She did not shout. She touched the case back with one finger and asked whether her husband's initials were still visible. They were. I suppose that is the part he touched most, she said. Her dignity hurt more than anger would have. Voss and Bell established a restitution fund before any court ordered us to do so. My personal savings covered the first payments. The insurer contributed after its internal review, and North Atlantic surrendered part of its claim when the evidence showed its verification process had ignored obvious ownership gaps. The company survived, its old structure did not. Caleb and Serena were charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, theft by deception, insurance fraud, falsifying commercial records, and conspiracy to commit arson. Charles faced charges tied to the suppression order, bribery payments, and false board certifications. Their attorneys blamed one another. Serena claimed Caleb controlled custody. Caleb claimed Serena controlled provenance. Charles claimed he relied on both. Their defenses contradicted each other so thoroughly that prosecutors needed only to place the statements side by side. Nora was not spared. She had approved 2 inventory schedules without verification. She had allowed fear for Owen's medical coverage to silence her when she knew the records were incomplete. The authorities credited her cooperation, but the accounting board suspended her license for 18 months. She resigned from Voss and Bell and began repaying the compensation she had received during the fraudulent period. The day she cleared her office, she placed her keys on my bench. I thought protecting Owen justified anything, she said. Anything done for love can still be wrong. Will you forgive me? I looked at my sister's daughter and saw both fear and responsibility in her face. I do not know yet, it was the honest answer. Some things can be restored only after the damaged parts are removed and examined separately. Others never return to their original condition. 3 months after the gala, the board offered to return full control of Voss and Bell to me. I declined. The company had nearly been destroyed because too much authority had remained inside one family. Giving it back to another single member of that family would not be justice. I called the employees into the workshop and placed a new proposal on the central bench. Voss and Bell would no longer belong to me, Caleb, Nora, or any outside corporation. It would belong to the people whose hands kept it running. 10 months after the Newport gala, the sign above our old brick storefront still read Voss and Bell. But the brass plate beside the door had changed. Incapable. I stood across Westminster Street on a cold April morning and watched Eli Booker unlock the front door. He no longer wore the nervous expression of an apprentice waiting to be corrected. A black watchmaker's apron covered his shirt, and a newly issued certification card hung from his pocket. He checked the lock twice, noticed me across the street, and raised one hand. "You're early," he called. "I founded the place. I'm allowed one bad habit, inside." The workshop sounded almost the way it had when Daniel was alive. Lathes hummed softly, drawers opened and closed. Someone laughed near the polishing room. The benches had been rearranged into smaller teams, and every employee held a voting share. No single relative could pledge the inventory. No single executive could alter a custody record. No valuable watch could move without 2 signatures, an owner notification, and an independent scan. Some people called the new rules excessive. Those people had never watched trust become collateral. The restitution fund had returned money or property to 21 affected families. 17 original watches were recovered intact. 4 came home altered but repairable. Margaret Ellis's watch remained the loss I carried most heavily. We mounted the recovered case back in a small walnut frame, along with the 2 wheels that had survived. Mrs. Ellis kept it beside her husband's photograph. She told me it was not the same as having his watch, but it was still something his hands had touched. Restoration sometimes means accepting that a fragment is not a failure. It is what survived. Caleb, Serena, and Charles were still awaiting final sentencing when the cooperative opened. Their lawyers continued arguing over who had designed which part of the scheme. The court had already accepted guilty pleas on several counts, and the remaining hearings concerned restitution, forfeiture, and the attempted warehouse fire. I did not attend. For a long time, I believed justice would feel like watching Caleb finally understand what he had lost. Instead, justice felt administrative: signed orders, frozen accounts, returned property, victims receiving phone calls, employees learning their jobs were safe. It was quieter than revenge and far more useful. Nora did not return to Voss and Bell. After her accounting suspension ended, she accepted a bookkeeping position at a non-profit clinic in Boston, the same clinic that had helped arrange Owen's cardiac care. Her salary was smaller. Her office had no glass walls, no private car service, and no one who could threaten her child's insurance in exchange for silence. She repaid the last of the compensation connected to the false inventory schedules 7 months after the gala. The following Sunday, she came to my house with Owen. He was 12 now, taller than I remembered, with a healing scar beneath his shirt, and enough energy to inspect every clock in my living room. Nora stood near the kitchen table, where we had once discussed her forged signature. "I'm not asking you to forget," she said. "I couldn't, I know." She placed a small envelope before me. Inside was a copy of her first paycheck from the clinic, and a note showing another payment to the restitution fund. "I want Owen to know that being afraid explains a choice," she said. "It doesn't erase it. That was when I forgave her, not because she had suffered enough, not because she was family, because she had stopped asking love to protect her from responsibility. Forgiveness did not restore us to what we had been. I no longer trusted her automatically, and she no longer expected me to. We built something more careful. She called before visiting. I asked questions instead of pretending everything was fine. Owen began spending one Saturday a month at the cooperative. Eli taught him to dismantle inexpensive practice movements. The first time a mainspring jumped from the barrel, he shouted so loudly that 3 restorers dropped their tweezers. Daniel would have loved him. My own role at Voss and Bell became smaller by design. I held one non-voting advisory seat for the cooperative's first year. I taught 2 mornings a week and refused every request to return as president. The company no longer needed a ruler, it needed standards. On the anniversary of the gala, Eli brought Daniel's pocket watch to my bench. We had repaired the scars left by the attempted removal of his hidden mark, but we had not polished them away. Beneath the balance cock, the 3 shallow dots were still visible around the deeper point. Beside them now ran a thin line where a tool had tried to erase the past. "Do you want me to replace the bridge?" Eli asked. "No, the damage lowers the value. It tells the truth." He nodded and handed me the watch. I wound it slowly. The crown resisted at first, then turned with the familiar pressure I remembered from Daniel's hands. The movement began beneath my fingers. Tick, pause, tick, steady again. I carried it to the front window. Outside, evening settled over Providence, turning the wet pavement gold beneath the streetlights. Employees left in pairs, calling goodnight. Nora waited at the curb while Owen pressed his face to the glass and waved at me. For years, I thought legacy meant preserving what Daniel and I had built exactly as we left it. I was wrong. A legacy that cannot survive new hands is only a possession. The company was no longer mine. That did not mean it had been taken from me. It meant I had finally placed it where Caleb could never put it, in the care of people who understood that custody is not ownership, authority is not entitlement, and love without accountability becomes another form of blindness. I closed Daniel's watch and slipped it into my pocket. It was not the rarest watch in the building. It was not for sale. And after everything that had been copied, pledged, altered, and nearly burned away, it was still keeping honest time. If this story reminded you that dignity sometimes requires boundaries, share where you are listening from, and subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to let betrayal write their final chapter.